welcome back to another set of shows. Today I'm going to talk about a variety of films. I'm going to start off with Exorcist Believer, as well as another possession movie. But this is the cinema release I saw this week. It's a weird one. Now, I've seen every Exorcist film in the cinema. I don't find possession scary at all. This film did not do any heebie-jeebies into me, like, at all. None of the Exorcist films hardly have. The only one that's been creepy is the third one for other supernatural reasons, just the way it was done. But generally, the Exorcist films don't really scare me. I find them interesting, though. So it's that kind of thing of I'm interested, but I don't go there thinking, oh no, this film's going to terrify me. It's not going to happen. I'm not a believer, so unlike the title. And this film does have the typical thing of a non-believer having to become a believer to save a loved one, and it's like, it's such a simplification of faith and reasons to believe or not believe that it becomes a bit annoying. It's just one of those things that always happens in movies. It's like, it's almost like saying, yeah, my lead character's a bit of a moron. That's really what it's saying. Because if you don't do it right, you don't take the time to do it right, and you only really have time to do it right in like a book where you can slowly build it. In films, it tends to always come across as a bit, facile and insulting to the audience, like insulting to the characters, if to say, yes, I'm that much of a dullard, I can't figure a completely look at life. It's just one of those things that it's always a bit annoying to me. It's like going from no faith to faith always feels like it's a cop out the character. It just really is, because you need to really put the effort in, and this film doesn't really put the effort into that area. And it is also a film that feels like half a film, which I'll get to. So it's the latest reboot of a series. Is not really a series. Now, the Exorcist films came from one book, The Exorcist, was made into a very successful film by Baron Friedkin in the early 70s. It made so much money, it was such a success, that of course they had to try and keep going with it. Even though it was a one-story situation. It's sort of like E.T. in a sense. There's no need to go any further. That set the story up. There'll be rip-offs, but that's the film. It's done it right. You don't need to do it anymore. It's done. But of course, they had to do sequels. And because Friedkin really didn't have the power to stop them, like Spielberg had the power to say, nah, we're not doing E.T. sequels. Because he sort of happened to the Jaws sequels, which is another situation where it was a one-story film. But basically, the first film had told the story, and you don't need to go any further than that. And they sort of happened with those sequels, because none of them worked. So they decided to make sequels, and one of the problems is there's not much there to make a sequel to, really. I mean, it's a simple situation. It was done well in the 70s. A lot of people adore this film. I think it's a well-made film, but I'd much rather watch French Connection or a lot of the freaking crime movies. I don't find it scary. I find it interesting, but not scary. But even then, it's not the most amazing film. It's just, it caught into a lot of problems the culture had at the time, dealing with youth, dealing with parents and youth. It just captured so much was going on in the culture at the time. It was just like the lightning rod for this moment, more than what the story was. The story was scary enough for people who believed, but for lots of other people it was just interesting look at what's going on in the world, which means it could not really be a series. But Hollywood sees money, so Hollywood goes to money. And in this case, it never worked. It's never worked. That's why there's sequels every so often, because every sequel is a disaster. And then by the time that the film goes on, the sequel goes on, eventually makes money and finds its place in culture. And then think, maybe we should do another one. Next, a disaster. And the same cycle repeats and repeats and repeats. And you have a lot of interesting disasters going on. Now, I really like a lot of the Exorcist sequels because they're weird. Because one of the things they had to do was hire oddball directors to do them. Because if you hired a hack, you'd get a hacky film, which is what happened in Exorcist at the beginning. But most of the other times they had interesting people, sometimes to their dismay later on, Because it's that thing is if you hire someone who looks at everything conventionally, like Rennie Harlan is more a very conventional director, you're going to get a lot of conventional ideas that's not going to be interesting. You're going to be pretty bored. Or you hire someone like John Boorman or Paul Schrader who are going to make their films with this setup. And and because it's a fantastical situation, these are two directors who have imagination, so they can go a bit far. And that's not exactly what the financiers want either. So it creates this tension within, because there's not enough story there to further it. Just following the line of the storyline from the first film, you need to bring in someone new, bring in new ideas. But those ideas don't really have that much to do with what attracted people to the original idea. So to actually advance the ideas always means you're always going to take it away from the original emotion, the original setup. Some film sequels, they set up is inherent within story after story because the setup lends itself to other stories, like a Batman story lends itself to other stories. Exorcist doesn't. So you have Exorcist 2, which is a wonderful disaster. I've done a video on it. It is wonderfully bizarre. I adore it, but it annoys so many people, which is another reason to adore it. Exorcist 3 was hacked about, and I remember when it came out, it was hated, right? It was hated. You can revise all you want later on, say, oh, this is a good film. But I remember it was hated when it was released. It was like, what the hell is this? This is not what we wanted. Where's the exorcism? Then there was an exorcism, and then it was like, that feels tacked on, because it was tacked on. And why are they talking all this boring stuff? It was hated on release, right? There was a few people that liked it. I mean, Mark Kermode liked it, of course, because he's basically the original Exorcist bitch. If you're one of the creators of the original Exorcist, he loves you. But if you get one of the sequels, nothing to do with him, oh, you're hated forever. He liked it. A few other people liked it. I remember Alan Jones and Starburst liked it. But mostly it was hated. There's a revisionist stuff going on saying, oh, it was a respectful sequel, maybe it wasn't liked as well as it should be. No, it was hated. It bombed. It was hated. It was like, this is not what we want. Why the hell did you do this? What's wrong with you? And then, a few years down the line, people said, there's some interesting stuff going on here. And then, slowly, it got its cult status. And then, Exorcist 2 got its cult status. Not for everybody. A lot of people still hate it. But a lot of people saw its merits. It's a small percentage see its merits. And they released the original cut of it, which was longer and made more sense. It doesn't solve the problems, but at least it's cohesive. Say, this is what the director wanted. So, you had two films. And then Legion was released, which had some VHS scenes as well as the scenes from the film were still in there, which get you closer to the original Peter Blatty idea. I prefer that version, even though it's very rough because of what's going on there. But I think some of the stuff in there is really creepy because I'd read the book years before I'd seen the film, so I knew what to expect when I saw the film. So you had that going on, and so you had basically a situation where you had a beloved first film and two sequels that were kind of interesting but hated generally. And slowly over time, you got to get the fans. But they're never going to clash against the first one and be thought of as better. They're not. It's just not going to happen. Then you get the fourth one. The fourth one was a disaster situation. Paul Schrader brought in, again because the problem was, they brought in, they said, oh, let's do a prequel to Farrah Maron's initial work against the demon. Because it was mentioned that he exorcised a boy in Africa in the late 40s. So they thought, oh, let's tell that story. So they tried to hire John Frankenheimer, who got ill and died. So Paul Schrader took over, apparently rewrote the script to suit himself, and made a very quiet, low. For Schrader, it's a big budget film. For most people, it's a low budget film about possession and how history is a form of possession and how your past can encroach on your ability to move on. It's a very beautiful film. It's not for everybody, but it was very much And because when it came out, when it was made, there's a lot of Japanese films and even the M. Night Shyamalan films that were much more subtle and far less like throw stuff at the screen all the time horror. So it was a subtle horror film that was not what the producers wanted at all. So they remade it with Rennie Harlan and threw lots of gore in there and changed the possessed person from a boy to a girl, even though it was originally said it's a girl. It was a boy. And they changed it to a girl because a girl can harks back to the original and makes you able to see, oh, that's the original. That ties to the original. It was awful. It's the most boring film ever. It's just appalling. Dominion's good, but it's not for everybody. So now we get to the last reboot. The reboot that has also had the same pattern. Now, because since that was 2005, the Exorcist Dominion came out. 2003 for beginning. So it's been 20 years. So you've had a TV series in between, but generally Exorcist properties lie dormant for a long time. The Schrader cut has developed some appreciation for some people like me, but generally no one cares about those prequels. So it's like, we're going to originally it was that we're going to reboot the series, and it was like, it's not a series, it's just a film plus some weird sequels. And then they said, no, we're going to do a sequel instead. And they brought David Gordon Green in, who had done Halloween reboot. And everyone thought, all is good because he's a classy director, he's done some good films. And he made this film, and then apparently to reshoot quite a bit of the film, there was lots of things that went from very hopeful to, oh my god, what happened? And then the film was released and people hated it. In other words, a typical Exorcist production and release strategy. You know, even the first one had lots of horrors behind the scenes and fears it would bomb, but at least that succeeded. Every sequel's had that same pattern. So why would you expect it to be any different from this one? And you see the film, and the film feels like there's massive bits of it cut out. And it feels like there's lots of moments that are thrown in there to be gory that have no impact whatsoever. And you feel like there's like at least a third of a film missing. And it's not complete. Now, I watched it, did not feel like a complete film. That's the big takeaway was, you had moments where you see the director doing his thing, and then there's other moments where it was like, they must have added stuff to sort things they didn't think worked, or who knows what, or trying to explain stuff. Because it feels like a film that we're trying to make it be subtle and be atmospheric, and be a look about faith and communities, and try and take it away from just being about the Catholic part of the Christian religion, and actually look at how possession has floated through different religions over the millennia, which I say is the case. I mean, there's even references in the Bible to possession from before there was, you know, the Christian faith. So it's been something that's always been something around. It's always been a superstition. It's always been there, like demons possessing. I mean, you look at vampires, were essentially demons possessing the bodies of the dead, and it's something that's always been there. It's this kind of iconic feeling to it, the rotting of the soul, and an innocent taken over by an ogre. It's something that's been going through forever. It's not just tied to Catholicism. It just became that way because of the Exorcist film, rather than being something that's a myth. So this film tries to take that back to that, to open it up, to create a mythology that you can move on to that isn't tied to what all the iconography of The Exorcist, which Boorman was trying to do, which Schrader was doing a bit of, which William Blatty did, because he took a detective dealing with the problems of faith and dealing with problems of belief, and did it in a more interesting way than this film managed. But again, like Exorcist 3, this feels like you've only seen half a film. Like, so some things have been butchered and added. And this film feels more incomplete than Exorcist 3. Because there's massive holes in it. I mean, basically, you start out in Haiti, setting up the idea of different religions and different sorts of faith, which to me was the strongest part of the film. That was the most interesting part of the film. The worst part of the film was essentially the traditional Exorcist stuff. When they went off to do the sidelines, that was interesting. But I kind of guess that when it was shown to an audience, they were like, what the hell is this? It's not an Exorcist film. So you got more Exorcist stuff in there. So I have a feeling I'd have liked the original cut more than this cut. So release the director's cut of Exorcist Believer for me. But anyway, so you can start in Haiti where a woman, there's an earthquake, a pregnant woman is dying. She neither, the father's given a choice, either save his daughter who's not been born yet or save his wife. Then we cut forward and the daughter's still alive and the wife's gone, and the daughter's very curious about her mother because she's never met her, and her father's trying to be the father and the mother, and he's given up his dreams to become a very traditional photographer to bring up his daughter. And it's this sense of a family dealing with compromises, but they're doing okay. They've got the problems, they're doing okay. And it's a small community that's just about, getting on with their lives. You've got the religious bits, the Christian religious bits. You've got different, various what would be viewed as minorities, just integrated into the mix of the society. And no one cares anymore. It's just people go on with their lives. No one's a big deal. Like, your lead character's black, he's on the whites, fine. And it's just people getting on with people. And into this area becomes this disappearance. 2 girls go into the woods. 3 days later, they reappear. They think they've just been gone for, a few hours, and it's been days. And this is when the film starts to hit its problems, where you start to get a sense of things were cut. Because the setup to the girls is okay, but you could do a little bit more so you get a sense of who they were before the possession hits. And you get a sense of that's cut down a little bit too much. Not much, but just a little bit too much. You could have done another scene or two just to give their personality a bit more. You get a sense of these girls just being girls and having fun and being up to mischief as a pair of teenagers. If you ever dealt with teenage girls, that's what they're like. So that's fun. They're likeable. You like them, and then they disappear, and you see the parents worry and grief, and all that's done well. The other girl, her parents are more religious, but it's not cartoony. You feel the father's a bit of a pain, but he's dealing with the stress of losing his daughter. And I've seen some reviews saying he's very cartoonish, and it's like, it feels like the person's actually, some of these reviewers are projecting their own, biases onto this character at times. He's just a guy who's not that great at being a father, but he's trying, he doesn't walk out the situation, he tries, but he's got flaws. The mother's more understanding and braver, and it's just, that's the dynamic. So basically you get a sense of the mother of the other girl and the father, who's our protagonist. They're the saner ones, and they're more bonded to each other once the situation starts. They kind of trust, okay, that's the adult in the room. I mean, it doesn't mean they're best pals, but they can sense that's the adult in the room. That's who I deal with. Good. So they don't have the theatrics, but that's a nice dynamic. And when the girls come back, that's when it goes wrong, because they instantly go from being the one time in their home, and then suddenly they become crazy. They instantly become crazy. There's no build up to it, and it's like, that's when you feel that something's been cut out here, because it kills the scares, because it feels like they've added stuff to the films here to try and make it more traditionally scary, to take it a block where there'd be build up to little things, to bigger things, to increase the fear. Instead, it just goes from 0 to 90 instantly, and it becomes like, okay, I'm out of the horror now. Like, you had a nice build up here of something going wrong, and then suddenly you've just gone straight to the horror, and it's like, no, that's too much. And until you jump into horror scenes without a breather, and it's like, that's not how you build a horror setup. And it feels like a set of producers saying, this film's too slow, cut stuff out, add some horror here. It just feels like it's been tacked on. And instantly I'm pulled out. So from then on, I'm getting pulled out every time there's a horror sequence, and then pulled back in when it's a dramatic sequence. Which is a weird situation for a horror film. But that's the way it goes. I mean, the father and the woman next door is a nurse, and she's like a middle-aged woman. She gives him a book written by Chris McNeil, who played by Ellen Burstyn from the first film, Torn Possession. So he goes to see her, and she comes to see the situation to give us some background to variations of different possessed people in the past. So you get a sense of the world of possession, not just the Catholic version, which is where it has lost a lot of people, because they just want the Catholic version. And there's other ones saying, oh, it's gone woke because it's trying to do this. And it's like, no, that's just the cultures. That's always been there. You had to do something new. There is a annoying line about patriarchy. I couldn't get into the room because they wouldn't let me into the patriarchal systems when our daughter was possessed, when the exorcism was going on. But the priest died. It was not a easy thing to get rid of the demon. And when Bernstein goes to deal with the demon, she instantly gets her eyes poked out in a really tacky sequence. And it's like, yeah, that's because you weren't that shows you what happens when someone who isn't ready goes in. And they choose the character who should know better. And it's like, it's another thing is like, this is an effective scare to someone who's not used to horror films, but for anyone else, it's like, I can see it happening a mile away. And why is a intelligent character doing something this stupid? And that's the thing. It just feels like certain characters are pushed into situations because of an Exorcist film, and they haven't done the legwork with character. There needs to be something else in this character's background that would push her to do this, that would make it plausible, and it's not there. They have this thing which is estranged from her daughter because she wrote the book, and that's why she's going forward to this thing, but it doesn't feel enough for some character who's been portrayed as intelligent, who's giving you all that exposition about possession, how dangerous it is, to suddenly do something stupid. It doesn't work. So, that's basically the problem with the film is it's forcing horror into sequences that you don't need horror. So, after that sequence, they decide the girls are possessed. The Catholic Church will not authorise that exorcism. They don't believe it. They think it would be bad publicity for them. So they just say, let the parents lock these kids up and hope for the best. And even a sequence going into this mental ward with all these children that feels like a outtake from Exorcist 2. So it's like there's lots of weird callbacks to other Exorcist films, not just the first one. There are callbacks to the first one with dogs fighting and things like that, and the father being a boxer, just Damien Karras, but there's lots of callbacks, but nothing that bad, nothing like really horrible. Some people are annoyed by those callbacks, but it was passing, it wasn't really that big a deal. The bigger deal really is that people are thrown in situations, and so much this feels like either something's been cut that would explain it, or you've added something because people thought it wasn't exorcist or horror enough. There's a sequence when the possessed daughter of the lead character tells the woman who's the next door neighbour, who's a nurse, who used to be interested in going to become a nun, stories of tales of information only she would know that no one else would know. And then there's a sequence of bleeding from the crotch area as if to say an abortion, which you don't get a context that till later when she tells the story. So it's a sort of sequence that doesn't really pay off, because it's like you can barely hear what she's saying, and it's for information you don't have yet. And there's things like that happen throughout the film. It's like a sequence that can only work and be scary if you have certain information beforehand. Now, and then it's overplayed. Like if they just had the information and stopped there, it would have paid off later on. Instead of going and do this big horror thing that just takes you out of the film. And it's not scary because there's no context to set up the scare. And that's the film's problem throughout. It's just that every time there's a horror sequence, it's stuff you've seen before. There's not new take on exorcism. It's trying to be traditional, but also you bring in the Haiti stuff. So essentially, the finale is the parents of the two girls bring in different people from different pasts. Like the woman, the nurse, because she knows information, she does the exorcism with a Haitian doctor. And it's a community coming together to exorcise the girls rather than the priests and things, which is an interesting idea. It just is cut down though. Your feeling is there were some psychological shocks we're trying to put in there, and they've done more of that and actually extended this a bit more through dialogue. It felt less of a half a film because it feels like it starts, stops, and it feels like there was more of the kind of more psychological stuff they could have done that would have been more effective, that would have made it feel more like a film, and made the actual exorcism feel like it was a real event rather than a 20-minute finale at the end of the film, which is what it feels like. It doesn't feel like they get pushed enough to actually get through this exorcism. It doesn't feel like it's like climbing Everest. It just feels like it's a tough thing and they get through it. Well, in the first one, it really felt like the priests were battered and bruised by the end of it because they all died. You know, it's that thing of how horrible it is. And the film has that problem where you get the feeling some stuff was cut out to make it more palpable for the modern audience. And certain things were put in, and the stuff that's put in just didn't really seem to work that well. And it was just cliched. So it feels like half a movie, and you feel like there was a better movie there that maybe was less traditional Exorcist film that would be probably more interesting though than what we got, because what we got was a film that sometimes was interesting, sometimes was not, and didn't connect up the way you hoped it would, because there was good actors and people were trying their best. But there was massive plot holes at the end of it. Like at the end of the film, one of the girls dies, and it's like, okay, how do you deal with that? The police show up, nothing seems to happen. It's like there's tons of plot holes, there's lots of issues, and interesting scenes mixed with really boring scenes. So it's a really weird film. I'm going to briefly mention another film I've seen called Seventh Day, which is a possession film starring Guy Pearce as a rogue exorcist for the church. This is going to be a 2-minute review. It's not very good. I saw it a week before Exorcist Believer. But the thing is, Guy Pearce is so good as a rogue exorcist that he's a lot of fun. And it's like, he's so much more fun than anything in Exorcist Believer. And he's so more entertaining than Exorcist Believer. Even though the film he's in is worse than Exorcist Believer. I mean, it has some ideas that could work if done right. But again, it's another film where they're very traditional Exorcist scenes that take away from what could be creepy scenes dealing with a family and the horrors of possession. Instead of just go for the cliches. The same thing we're getting, and we got it in Pope's Exorcist as well. Basically, you're getting the same scenes again and again. It's like you're not finding new scares within the setup. So just don't do the setup, or go so over the top like Pope's Exorcist did, and just do it that way. And you might get something. You might have something interesting. But really, this film is worth seeing just for Guy Pearce, because he's having a blast playing this unconventional exorcist who's just a git. He's a completely awful character in lots of ways, but he's played by a charming actor who's having a lot of fun. And so basically, the worst Exorcist film I've seen this year was not an Exorcist film, but it had the most fun performance. It's even more fun than Russell Crowe in Pope's Exorcist. But it's a far less seen film. So I hope you enjoyed this video. I'm sure you're not going to see either of these films I've just mentioned. But there we go. Right, that's me for now. Bye.